Welcome to Rethinking Youth Ministry, where each week we hope to raise the bar for youth ministry by asking questions, interviewing thinkers, and having real, honest conversations about what it looks like to lead the next generation. I'm CJ, and today I am thrilled to be joined by Crystal Chang.
Hey there.
Tom Chef-Shunas.
Hey, everybody.
Also known as Chef. And Kurt Johnston.
Hello, hello.
Now, Kurt, this is the first time you're on the Rethinking Youth Ministry podcast, and we are thrilled to have you here.
Thank you.
Because you have been in youth ministry for how long now?
In youth ministry since 1988, so it'll be 30 years this June.
And I know that you have been pastoring at Saddleback Church, which is an amazing church since that time. Now, what have you been doing all of those years at Saddleback?
Yeah, I haven't been at Saddleback since 88. I've been at Saddleback since 97, so 20 years. And I started out as a junior high pastor, and I was the junior high pastor only. Just junior high pastor only, one campus for about 14 years of my 20, 13 years of my 20. In the last 7-8 years, I've transitioned into student ministry, overseeing junior high and high school. And then we started planting campuses. And now I am the next gen. So I kind of give direction to children through college at 20 campuses, 4 of which are international.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. And now I know you're not just a pastor, you're also a writer, a speaker. So where, just right here at the top, for those that are interested in finding out some of what you've written in your 20-something years here, where can they find some of those things?
Yeah, thanks. A lot of it's kind of all over the place, but the best place to get most of it would be if somebody would just go to group.com or simplyyouthministry.com, and just really if they search the junior high stuff, there's a whole bunch of junior high resources there that I've helped create over the years.
Awesome. What's the resource or book or thing that you're most proud of that you can?
Can I give you 2?
Yeah, let's do it.
The one I'm most proud of is probably my very first book that I wrote 15 years ago, Controlled Chaos.
Okay.
Making Sense of Junior High Ministry.
Yeah, perfect.
It's been retitled it's now Middle School Ministry Made Simple.
Okay.
That was kind of my blood, sweat, and tears book. The other one I really, really like is a book I wrote with Mark Ostreicher.
Okay.
So I was kind of the brains behind that project. I was kind of the brains. He was the eye candy. But we wrote a couple books together, but one of them there's a whole series for middle school kids, and the middle school survival series. And one of them is My Faith. And it's 72 little mini chapters answering 72 questions about faith in Jesus and Christianity, written specifically for middle school kids. And I just think if I could put one resource in the hands of every junior higher in the country, it would be that book.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's really cool. And I know we'll have links to all that in the show notes, but I just wanted to give everybody listening just a sense of who you are and what you've done over the past 20-something years, because that really is what we're here talking about today. Like, that is so rare. And today on Rethinking Youth Ministry, we're actually talking about setting yourself up for long-term ministry, because we've all heard the statistic, that the average youth pastor, student pastor is in his or her position for 18 months. And whether or not that's exactly true, the facts remain that most youth pastors aren't youth pastors for very long. So if you want to set yourself up for long-term ministry with students, how do you do that? That's what we're talking about today, and that's where we're really excited to have Kurt joining us. So let's just jump into it. I'm going to start with a question. I mean, I know that Crystal, Chef, Kurt, you guys have been doing ministry for a long time, in a good way, a long time, not like a long time, but just a good long time. And I want to ask you, what's the number one thing that you wish you knew on day one when you started as a youth pastor?
Well, I wish I knew that my life would not always look like it did when I first started working in the single, no kids days.
It's different phases, isn't it?
They're just different phases. And it would have been great to set some boundaries and make some really good habits early on, recognizing that one day there would be more people in my life than there were at that exact moment.
Yeah.
It's good. I think, one thing I wish I knew, which is tough. I started when I was 22. I got my first full-time youth ministry position. I wish I knew myself better. So much of my ministry career has been spent learning about myself and how God's wired me and what my gifts are. And part of that's natural, right? You don't know yourself very well at 22. I think what I would tell my 22-year-old self is, hey, Kurt, learn about yourself, pay attention.
Yeah.
Don't just kind of get by on your natural raw stuff, but pay attention to how God's wired you, what's unique about you, leverage your uniqueness and your giftings more effectively.
Wow. Yeah. That's awesome.
So to pay attention as you go.
Yeah.
You know, I have a friend who says that he's never seen a great leader who's younger than 35. He's seen very talented people, but it just takes some time to to really, so pay attention.
Right.
As you go. I mean, maybe this is similar. I'm going to quote Tim Ferriss.
People often mess our quotes up. They mismatch our quotes all the time.
Johnston. But you know, he talks about, and you got to be careful as a student pastor saying this, but he talks about protect the asset. And his whole point is
like
your mind is, yeah, exactly. Your mind is the primary, asset of your ministry. Your faith, I would say, is really the thing that you've got to really protect. And I mean, gosh, the roadside is littered with bodies of people who, sacrifice their own faith for ministry.
Wow.
Because they didn't take care of themselves. They didn't take care of their body. They didn't get enough sleep along the way. It's pretty amazing. And I had when I first started at North Point, Andy sits us all down and he says these words. He says, if you think God needs more than 50 hours of your time in a week, your God's not big enough,
Yeah.
So, I thought that was an interesting point. And quit thinking you can do it all. You can't. Quit. So,
I like what you said about he's never seen a great leader over 35, or younger than 35.
Right.
It's very interesting because on the one hand, if you're not careful, that could be used to put young leaders in their place.
Right. I don't want to do that.
Hey, buddy. Hey, lady, quit. Your time will come.
Right.
But on the other hand, it allows young leaders to give themselves some grace.
Yeah.
Like,
really
hey,
good.
give yourself some grace. You don't have to rush. You don't have to be awesome at 25.
Right.
You've got to
learn.
You've got to learn. You've got to pay
Right.
attention. But it just allows 25, 26-year-olds to not be there yet. And I think that's important because we
It's
want
okay
it.
to be where you're at.
It's okay to be where you are.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the research is amazing. The brain research is, adolescence now, they used to say was over at, 16 for girls, 17, 18 for boys. Now they're
That's so not true.
into the mid to late 20s. You're still, your brain's still kind of settling in. And
Which is really weird when you counter that with, but studies show that puberty is actually engaging earlier and completing earlier. So kids are sort of in the puberty ages earlier, and yet adolescence is extending longer. It's a really weird dynamic that we're in.
And even when those brain connections are finished forming, you haven't had those brain connections for very long.
Right.
Maybe.
You're learning to drive them.
You're learning what to do with this brand new brain that you've got.
Yeah.
So we just talked about, what you three wish you knew, on day one. And that's almost kind of fast forwarding to the end. Maybe that's some of, the application points a little bit. But let's rewind. Let's talk about what's setting up youth pastors for short-term ministry. If we're talking about long-term ministry, what's keeping them from getting there right off the bat? What are those short-term ministry indicators?
Well, I think for a lot of people in youth ministry, there's a pressure to build a program entirely around me and my personality and my talents. And when we do that, we will ultimately either cap the growth of our ministry and not be able to grow past our own abilities, or we're setting ourselves up for burnout because nobody else can replace me. Nobody else can substitute me. And I just think that's a pressure that everybody faces, especially early on when you're trying to prove yourself and you're trying to move forward in your career and you're trying to make sure your senior pastor knows that he didn't make a mistake in hiring you.
Yeah.
That, you just end up building everything around you and the way that you do things.
Well, kind of like what we were just saying a minute ago, you might be that 25-year-old youth pastor who is trying to be that 35-year-old great leader a little too early. You're trying to fast forward that process a little bit.
Right.
So what else, guys? What else?
Well, I think to kind of go along with that, you get help. Like, if I one real practical thing I think I would have said to myself at the beginning of ministry is, find great folks to walk with kids. And I would also say, I would say they're not as cool as you think they are. Like, cool is not near as important as you think it is. I used to go out looking for cool small group leaders, and I thought young and hip was the answer. And I just, you know, sometimes they are, but it has a lot more to do with, do they keep showing up, you know? And after time, that matters. So empty nesters have become, you know, it was like, I just quit trusting my own gut as far as who I think would work. And I look for quality people with integrity who understand this is hard work and long work, and they will probably make it. I would also say trust your gut when it doesn't feel right. If you're trying to find a reason to say no to a volunteer, then just say no to the volunteer.
So you're saying the opposite of those things are what, you know, when that youth leader is looking for, you know, I want the 19-year-old small group leaders or whatever, that's what's setting them up for failure. You're going for, you know, the solid, tried and true small group leaders rather than some of those opposite things.
No, I mean, I just don't, I mean, you're going to be looking for small group leaders the rest of your career. You will never be done. Like that is the job. You're always looking for more leaders, better leaders. And when, you know, just as you get that, your ministry grows, you know, somebody gets a DUI, whatever it is, you're constantly finding new small group leaders. And so that's just part of the job. So don't limit your pool to what you think the kids will love. And in reality, what the kids will love is somebody who's committed to them and understands it.
Yeah, I love that. I think in addition to what you guys have shared, for me, if I were to say what's setting young leaders up to burn out or get out too early, or the 18-month thing, I believe it or not, I would say maybe being too hungry. Yeah. You know, Patrick Leoncini, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. His new book, The Ideal Team Player, talks about the virtues of the ideal team player are to be humble, hungry, and smart. And I think a lot of young leaders, this was me when I was young, nothing but hungry. I got to prove myself. I got to show the church that they hired the right person when they took a risk on me. And they neglect the humility and the smartness. Smartness not being IQ, but smartness.
It's EQ, right?
It's EQ. Right. And I think so many people don't last in church ministry because they don't have what I call, I didn't coin this, I don't think, but maybe I did, organizational intelligence.
Yeah.
They don't have the intelligence to navigate their churches, their organization's culture. And young people think, man, if I just bust my butt and get attendance up, then I'll be here for the long. And they wonder, why did I get fired? My numbers are higher than ever. And it's because they're not humble and smart. They're hungry, but that's only a third of the equation.
Right.
And they're kicking against the goads in a whole lot of culture stuff. And ultimately, you know, churches get kind of tired of trying to pull you into account. Hey, remember, man, we work on Mondays.
Yeah.
Hey, remember, we don't wear shorts in the office. Or hey, remember, after communion, we don't eat the communion bread with junior high, whatever it is. And young leaders, you're like, oh, this is all, and we just do. I've never seen a young leader change the church's culture. I've just never seen a young leader change. I've hardly seen any leaders our age change the church's culture.
Yeah.
And they fight it, and then they wonder why it didn't work out. It's a lack of smarts. It's also a lack of humility.
So let me ask you a slightly, the three of you, a slightly, deeper question into this, because I'm hearing, the burnout thing, the personality driven, we're driving. You're talking about you're too hungry, you're busting your butt. Does this just come down to burnout, or is it deeper than that if you're trying to stay in ministry for the long term? Is it just don't burn out, or is there something more to it?
Yes, in the most simple terms, don't burn out. And yes, there's way more to it than that. But I mean, honestly, like for me, when people say, hey, how have you lasted so long? 30 years, almost 30 years. I used to try to come up with these really deep, meaningful, spiritual answers. And my honest answer now, as I've thought about it, is, well, I've just kind of refused to quit.
Yeah.
Right. Because as you stay in it longer and longer, there's really natural off ramps.
Yeah.
That nobody would fault you for. So you get into youth ministry and you get married. That would be a natural off ramp. Hey, I'm getting married. I need to make a little bit more money. Maybe have a little bit more stable hours. Nobody would fault you for that. Now you're gonna have kids. Hey, we're gonna have kids. My wife wants to maybe work part time, or I just want to, whatever it might be. Nobody would fault you for that. You turn 40. Hey, I'm 40. I've been in it for 15 years. Time to maybe slow down. Maybe time to actually afford a home. Nobody would fault you. Nobody would fault. I'm 52.
I'm tired of sleeping in the youth room. Let's buy a house.
If I said, hey, 52, there's a natural off ramp just called aging out, right? If I left now, not only would people not fault me for it, but they'd give me a standing ovation. Thanks for your years of faithful service. Right. I haven't survived because I'm the smartest or the best or whatever. Long term, it's just I just keep blowing by the off ramps. And as long as you don't, have an affair or steal money from the offering or whatever, as long as you don't do that stuff.
Two great ideas.
Just like you last by refusing to quit.
That's it. Yeah.
And the burnout plays into that, right?
Two questions. First one is, what's the next off ramp? Death? Is that where we are at 52? No.
Yeah, I hope there's a few more that are going to pass by.
That was some shade.
Okay.
I hope there's a few more.
I mean, he's so old.
But
That's awful.
hey, no joke. Kara
Says
Powell.
the
I'm going to quote Kara
40
Powell. I ran into
45.
Kara Powell
I can't remember how old
today.
I am.
I ran into Kara Powell today, and she's like, "Kurt, how old are you?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Yesterday was my birthday. I'm 52." And she's like, "Whoa." She goes, "I would have placed you at 40." No joke. She said, "I would have placed you at 40."
Well,
which I then thought,
the
"Ooh,
flat bill.
I need to grow up." Like
Right.
that's 12 years. I'm a little bit. I'm acting a little bit too young.
Well, to go with your not quitting thing, you have a personality where you can let stuff go. I mean, if you're somebody who just can't let stuff go, or you can shrug things off, or you're very good at kind of looking at the perspective of something that I've seen so many people, they just burn, they just burn up in they're just so stressed that someone would ever do something like that. They just,
right.
And they take they take everything so personally.
And I guess to that, I would say the airplane analogy, put your own oxygen mask on first, right? I mean, there's a reason why they say, if things get crazy, put your own oxygen mask on first so that you can take care of all the other stuff that's really important. And I think even no matter how you're wired, it's easier for some than others, because I'm laid back. Yeah. I'm laid back and I'm relaxed, but I'm a driver. I just have this like relaxed concern.
Well,
so I sleep. I sleep
twice a week. I get a call. Hey, I have an idea.
Yeah. I mean, so I sleep well. I surf. I do my stuff.
Right.
But man, I'm a driver, and I gotta be careful. So no matter how you're wired, you gotta figure out, how do I put my own oxygen mask on first? How do I feed my own soul? How do I get my own time away? How do I make sure that I'm healthy so that I can do everything that the job entails, and so that I can last a long time? Because if you choose to stay in youth ministry for a long time, I'm convinced, and I know it's some bias and there's a limited perspective, but I'm convinced youth ministry is the toughest, most demanding ministry in the church, maybe short of being the senior pastor who carries the whole burden of everything. But just the funkiness of our job and the diversity of what we're asked to do and the hours we keep. Man, if you don't have your own oxygen mask on, you're setting yourself up, CJ, for the burnout. Burnout happens when you're not taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I love about what you said about refusing to quit is if quitting's not an option, you have to figure it out when stuff isn't working. Like if you're burning out.
I never said it wasn't an option. I just said I haven't done it yet. It's always an option.
Quitting
if
is always
you
an option.
decide to refuse to quit, then you have to put your own oxygen mask on first.
Right.
If dying's not an option, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first and figure out what's causing burnout and put systems in place and find volunteers, because there's no other off-ramp for you.
Yeah. And I mean, this might be spinning the tables a little bit, but I also think there's some people in youth ministry who maybe shouldn't be. I mean, it's okay to be in it for 18 months. Most of us, almost everybody, is passing through youth ministry. It's just for some, it's a longer pass through than others. But I probably won't die a youth pastor. I hope I do, but I probably won't. I'm probably passing through. And what that means is there will be an off-ramp for all of us. And so staying a long time is great. The only thing worse than staying a long time is staying too long. When you shouldn't be in it.
Right.
Do you think it's bad to, if you're a youth pastor and you do see it as a short term, like this is the season I'm in, but I'm trying to.
This is a stepping stone.
Yeah, it's a stepping stone. Do you think there's danger in that while we're on that topic?
Well, I think there's danger in it if you're constantly going into work hoping for the next thing.
Right.
That you're not going to be a great youth ministry. I mean, so I think people talk, well, I'm called to be a lead pastor. Well, a lot of calling has to do with your opportunity, and God's been clear. If you do well with what you've been entrusted with now, you'll be given more, and I don't even know that it's more, it's different, whatever else, but your job is to take care of what's been put in front of you as far as the opportunity goes. But You can tell when someone's looking past what they're currently doing. The kids can tell when someone's looking past what they're currently doing. And chances are, if you're constantly looking past what you're currently doing, you're not going to get asked to do what's next, because you're just not going to be great at it. Now, you might be a great communicator. You might get, but you can't look past it.
And everybody has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And the nature of the beast is, and it used to bother me, but now I go, I get it. Understandably so. Youth ministry is a safe place for a church to hire somebody out of the gate. Children's ministry is riskier, right? There's liabilities. A lot more can go wrong in kids ministry. Not too many churches are hiring the 22-year-old to be their adult discipleship pastor.
Yeah.
So, your ministry career has to start somewhere. And so it starts for most of us in youth ministry. And for some people, it's a shorter tenure than others, and God moves them through it to whatever he has next. And I think that's natural and good and healthy, unless you're looking for what's next, or unless you get out when you didn't need to. You burned out, or you flamed out, you messed up, you did boneheaded things. Then that's unfortunate, because maybe God wanted you in it for 10 years and you only lasted 3. Because of whether it's moral stuff or maybe just your own pace, you were too hungry too early, and you couldn't make it.
So we've touched on burnout quite a bit here, that maybe it's that kind of slow fade out. But what about that student pastor who's like, I've already passed that 18-month mark. In fact, I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years.
Here's what I'd say about all of that. Like, I think student ministry is the best place to prepare to lead a church. Right. Because it is a church. I mean, you have a group of parishioners. You're doing programming. You're doing care ministry. You're getting volunteers to lead groups, and you're casting vision to those folks. You're worried about budgets. I mean, the only thing you probably aren't doing is fundraising. But you are leading a church. You have to talk. You have to be able to speak with vision. You have to teach yourself to get. So I would say to that person, there is plenty to learn all around you that will prepare you for what's next.
I think you're doing lots of fundraising. It's just a sucky kind of fun. It's car washes and pasta dinners. Where the pastor gets to go out and talk.
Can I go to dinner with the rich
Am I allowed to say sucky on this podcast?
For $200 instead of 70 hours of work on the cheese and sausage sale?
Because the tithe from a 15-year-old isn't helpful.
So, but what about that what I was kind of steering us, and I like that you paused me, Chef. That was great.
Anytime.
But yeah, is for that pastor that has been doing this 3 or 4 or 5 years and things are fine.
Yeah. What
do they need to be on the lookout for that could derail them, that they might not see coming? Because now you guys are way past that mark. You've got the benefit of hindsight. A pastor that's doing this 3 or 4 or 5 years doesn't have that benefit yet.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because I could have had a 30-year youth ministry career, but I could have done that 30 years in 15 churches, right? Which is hooray for a 30-year youth ministry career. Interesting, 15 churches. So there's almost 2 sets of skills, right? There's a set of skills of how do you just make it long-term in ministry in general, and then how do you last in one context for as long as possible. And that goes back, I'll stand on the soapbox all day long, all the time about your church's DNA and your church's culture. It's the unwritten rules that get you every time.
Yeah.
The written rules, we're all smart enough to kind of follow the written rules. The unwritten stuff, or to phrase it another way, is if you don't know the wins. So I'll talk to youth pastors a lot, and they're frustrated. And one of the reasons they're frustrated is they have a different win than their supervisor.
Yeah, that's great.
And they're like, man, we had more kids than ever at camp this summer, but nobody cares. What do they care about? They just keep asking me how many kids got baptized. Well, there you go. There's the win. Like, why don't you just switch? Because if you baptize a lot of kids and you hit that win, then you can do everything else that's important to you. So figure out what are the 1 or 2 wins at your church. You hit those consistently, and then you can do everything else that you're passionate about, that you believe in. Call it politics, call it smart, right? Hungry, humble, smart. But do the hard work of going, I'm going to do a couple things that matter most to my church. And then that will give me the freedom to do everything else that I love that they don't really care that much about, but it brings me joy, and I know it's healthy youth ministry. I think you can last in youth ministry a long time without figuring that out. But if you don't figure that out, you'll go from church to church to church, and you'll be frustrated oftentimes.
Well, you're gaining influence as you do the things that they want to see or that they qualify as success, right?
Right.
So you're being wise. It doesn't mean you're not celebrating the things you feel are important. And I mean, getting kids baptized is a good example because it's a number many people count. I mean, you got to be super careful about it to hit certain numbers. But you know, if that's what they want to see, then that's what you report, and you could still celebrate
super
the
careful.
camp.
So I shouldn't
baptize the same kid.
I should baptize the same kid. Kind of like altar calls, recommitments.
Right.
Are you ready to
come to the water one more
recommit?
time? The bus is away one more time.
Well,
Baptism on demand tonight, kids.
It's just so
the water is warm. The water is warm.
But I think it also takes, and I like that you said it smart. It also takes a big dose of humble to put somebody else's goals in front of your own.
Yeah.
Especially when that somebody is the boss and you may or may not disagree with them. I think that's a healthy exercise, even if they're wrong.
Right.
To choose to put their goals ahead of my own goals because they might know something that I don't know.
But man, that is a discipline that's hard for leaders. It's hard the younger you are, and then depending on how you're wired, because that it's selflessness. What's helped me in that, because I can be a pretty selfish leader. Like, I know what I want to do. You know, I've used your thing 1,000 times, Chef. T-Rex got to hunt. T-Rex. I always give you credit. But you know, the way I'm wired, like I gotta do what I'm wired to do, and submitting, which is a word we hate, but submitting to the larger vision, the context, is tough, but vital. And in the short term, it's painful. But I think one of the keys to longevity is to have a long view. You know, the trajectory of our ministry career is really long. And if we're not careful, man, we get fixated on that one thing that just bugs us about our church. That one time, they just never said thank you about, and we just chew on that and chew on it in a way that we would never want to be the case in our marriage or any of that, right? Like, don't chew on that kind of stuff. And people jump off ship because they have a short view, and the present conflict, the present frustrations outshine the trajectory that we're on.
Yeah. Wow. You know, one thing that I think helped me was I'm not good at a lot. So I always felt like, you know, like I shouldn't be the guy who's up there and, you know, highlighted. And so, but what it did for me was I changed what I qualified as success was not necessarily that I got to do some things, but that I built a ministry that would work without me. So it was kind of like, I don't know why or where this came from, but I always felt like what my ministry looks like 2 years after I leave it will be a better report card of what it looks like now while I'm here, of how I did as a leader, as far as what I was stewarded, had I given away leadership to the right folks, had I created systems that would go beyond me. You know, would the kids even care that I left? You know, it might hurt my feelings, but at the same time, you know, I mean, you've always been so good at that. You put people on stage. You've done, and every time I go to, you know, to see your church, you're rarely. I think I saw you one time, actually speak, and but you're putting people up there. But you created a system where other people are, and the ministry's great. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So,
yeah, and you know, one of the things I think because I think there's phases. I'm going to use that phrase completely out of context, but there's phases in youth ministry too, and there is a danger phase of, hey, I've made it. CJ, you were talking earlier, I've made it 5 years, right? And one of the dangers of that youth ministry middle age is, you know, if you're what I say all the time is you don't have to be a home run hitter. If you just consistently hit singles in your church, but you can be counted on to hit singles, you're going to stay there a long time. They're going to love you for a long time. And what will happen is they never take anything off your plate. They just keep adding more and more. I'm not a home run hitter, but I hit singles a lot. I hit a lot of singles. And nothing's ever been taken off my plate. I just keep getting more and more and more and more added on. And what can happen there is you start losing sight of some of the stuff that you love. Yeah, you kind of outgrow good old-fashioned youth ministry, and then discontent or a lack of purpose, or I don't get to do. And so one of the things I've purposely done is I talk to people about this too, is hold on to some stuff. Yeah. Because we've all been trained, give it away. You got to multiply yourself. And man, if you're holding on, you're the bottleneck, and that's all true. But there's got to be, what are 2 or 3 things that you just freaking love?
Sure thing.
You might not even be better at it than everybody else, but it brings you joy. And so in the early years, you got to be careful. But as you get older, you've kind of earned the right to hold on to some stuff that when you put your head on your pillow at the end of the night, you go, man, this thing's crazy. Am I still called to this? But you get to do a few things that you love, and that's kind of keeps that little fire burning in you.
So Kurt, I'm gonna give you something here, and this is for free. So earlier you said say no to the off ramp. What you're talking about now is stay in your lane, stay in the right lane, stay in the lane that you want to be in, and hold up. There you go.
Thank you, CJ.
There you go. We'll edit this out so you can you can use that for free later on. But as we get closer to wrapping up here, I do have a big final question here. This whole topic is, setting yourself up for long-term ministry. But what we're talking about is not just long-term ministry, but long-term effective ministry. So as we wrap up, how does the youth leader, the student pastor listening right now set themselves up for long-term effective ministry? What are your final thoughts? And maybe what's your practical, okay, here's something to start doing to help ensure that you can do this for the long haul?
I think, and this first part will sound so spiritual, but I'll go with it.
We can talk about spiritual things.
I would say three things. I'd say three things. Know Jesus. Like just be in love with Jesus. Just remember what it's all about. Know Jesus, know yourself, to thine own self be true. Your gifts, what brings you joy, what you can do, what you can't do. Be comfortable in your own skin, and know your church.
That's great.
Know your church. Know Jesus, know yourself, and know your church.
Kurt, you mentioned that knowing yourself is a big deal. What would you recommend for a young leader in the early years who's like, I don't yet know myself. What do I do?
Sure. Man, I would recommend any one of the top 5 kind of personality profiles. The 2 that I love, Enneagram and Strength Finder. Enneagram's my favorite, partly because you have to remember like 1 or 2 numbers and it's pretty easy.
Yeah. What's your number, Kurt?
7, a strong 7. A 7 with an 8. I'm an 8 wing.
We'll have to do an episode on the Enneagram at some point.
The Enneagram's great.
I have no idea what it is.
So take those tests, and then also ask people. Like, don't be afraid to take people out to lunch and go, kind of that 360 evaluation, Hey, what are my blind spots? What are the quirks? What are things I do that just annoy people? Take your senior pastor out to lunch and say, hey, can you speak into me? Where are my leadership weaknesses? What am I really good at? Like, what do I add to this team? Just be constantly learning about yourself. It's scary because it's uncomfortable, and for everything you like about yourself, the Enneagram, what I love about it is it talks about your fatal flaw, like your your terrible sin. So I'm a 7. So my fatal flaw is gluttony, because I love life, right? So the more of life I can get, the better. So if it's good, I want more. Well, anyway, I digress. I digress.
No, that's great, because I think, we talk about some of those personality tests all the time, just as a culture and as a church body, but so many of us don't actually, we hear, oh, that's a great idea, but we never actually do it.
Well, self-examination is, it's a little intimidating.
But it could be a difference maker.
Yeah.
How do you actually do this now? Long-term effective ministry. It could be high level, it could be practical.
I think I would say 2 things. One would be get some time outside your ministry to set up some systems just for longevity. It's hard to do it in the middle of it, and we all know that. It's hard to do it when the phone's ringing and the email is pinging you and parents are standing at your door and your senior pastor's calling. I get it. Sometimes you got to get outside the door to work on it, but it's so important because not only are we protecting our own longevity, but there are people watching us in ministry, and there are volunteers, and there are our staff members, and there are interns, and there are students watching how we live, and it will ultimately be how they decide to live. And so I think it's a big responsibility for us to be good stewards of what we've been given. And then the other thing I think I would say to a young leader and to a young me is just give yourself some grace, give yourself some room to mess up.
Yeah.
My first teaching mentor recognized some things in me that I didn't recognize yet, and one of those was a little addiction to perfection. And she a little addiction to perfection. And she said to me, hey, as you walk into the classroom the first time, here's what I want you to remember. if nobody goes to the hospital or needs long-term counseling because of what you did to them this year, that's a win.
It's a good
And
night.
You should
It's a win
celebrate
for a first-year
that.
teacher.
She said, don't
It's a good day.
aim for anything else. Everything else after that's a bonus, but give yourself space to be a mess the first year.
That's
great.
good.
Just
That's
so helpful.
great.
Chef, what about you? Thoughts on?
Well, I keep going back to the gift thing, but kind of the other side of the gift thing. You know what your gifts are, and realize all of us are only good at 2 or 3 things. Like, I mean, that's it. So, and that's the model. That's the model of leadership that Jesus introduces us to in the upper room. That hey, the helper's coming. And it will be
because
better
I mentioned
for you.
Jesus, you got to
I've got to up you.
go better Jesus
Oh,
on.
here I'm going.
Let's pray.
Well, I mean, and then the Apostle Paul teaches us about the gifts, and that
Yeah.
this is how the body of Christ works, and this is how it's supposed to work. So when we feel like we're supposed to be all things, it's not good for us. It's not good for the church. And so, like, lean into your gifts, find help outside of that.
So you're saying as quickly as possible.
I mean,
Like find help from day one.
I mean, even if you, we keep talking about how you can learn about yourself no matter how young you are. And there are, I am not a free throw shooter. I need someone to shoot free throws for me. It's just the way, that's an easy, it's just not going to, I can't. It's terrible. I'm a swimmer, it's the way it goes. But, when it comes to leadership and different
we got to wrap this up. I'm thinking of even a Speedo right now. No joke.
Right.
It's not even a bit.
Oh,
I honestly was thinking about even a
That's
Speedo,
gross.
which
And
is
now
weird.
we all are.
Weird.
Thanks, Kurt.
Yeah. Sorry.
What time is it?
Sorry, it's late. I apologize. What time is it? Midnight or something?
It's
Coming
going
up
on
on
it.
11:30.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious.
So
No, it's great. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us for this conversation. And it is late. So when you said 11:30, we're not talking 11:30 a.m. We're talking about 11:30 p.m. And that's just because Kurt's in town, and
It's the dirty South, guys.
we wanted to make this
That's how
happen.
you guys roll. Is that the context
yeah,
of
you're
dirty
in
South?
the ATO.
It's-
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
working hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, working. But we have a lot of fun here, and Kurt, we are so grateful that you joined us for this
thanks for
very
having me.
late
Thanks for
episode.
having me.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys, and thank you for joining us for the Rethinking Youth Ministry podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would love for you to subscribe to the podcast through whatever app you're listening to this. And while you're there, we would love for you to leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing and what we can do to make this podcast better. And finally, to check out all the great resources that we mentioned in this episode, we mentioned a lot of things. We'll have all of that nice and neatly compiled for you in our episode show notes. And you can check those out by visiting rethinkingym.org. That's also where we'll have links to all of Kurt's stuff, his social media. You'll find all of that stuff there as well. Until next time, I'm CJ.
I'm Crystal.
I'm Chef.
I'm Kurt.
And thank you for listening.